James Wan is arguably the most influential horror director working today. In 2013, he helped create what is the biggest horror franchise according to box offices with The Conjuring. In 2004, he completely changed the landscape of horror alongside Leigh Whannell with the suspense thriller Saw. And in 2021, he completely redefined the genre with the off-the-walls and insane Malignant. Whenever one of his works was released, it usually would change horror forever, and I think in no place is that more true than Insidious. Insidious had an interesting premise, which combined with scares that had never been seen in the genre like it before, led to its release single-handedly changing the entire direction of horror for the 2010s. So many horror films would try and replicate Insidious's jump scares and story beats, hoping to reach some of the same success that movie reached. That is what eventually led to the oversaturation of the jumpscare genre. Honestly, without Insidious, The Conjuring would likely have been an entirely different movie, as it takes a lot of ideas from Insidious and takes them to the next level. With a tiny budget of $1.5 million, Insidious started off as a small-scale haunted house and possession story, evolving over time into a vast franchise with a lot of history. This video should be coming out when its 6th installment is released, and with the series having that many films under its belt, you would think it must be a really good franchise. But unfortunately, it's not. Ever since the very first film in the franchise, nearly every Insidious film has been received poorly, and the story seems to lose what made the first one good more and more. I myself was originally a huge fan of Insidious while I was growing up, and I loved how connected it all seemed to be. But after watching The Red Door in theaters, I decided to revisit the series to see if it was good. Lo and behold, Insidious was not anywhere near as good as I remembered it. This series has been especially made fun of lately, as despite being the 6th film of a franchise, its recent trailers and posters are using Obsession and The Backrooms as a selling point instead of its previous films. Most fans of the franchise aren't even excited for this film and seem to actively be mocking it. So, how did Insidious get to this point? What went wrong to turn something so beloved into something so clowned on? Today, we will be journeying through the Insidious franchise, following the release order, both to form a timeline and better understand the series, while also trying to figure out what happened to turn this flagship horror into a joke. Naturally, our first stop will be the film that started it all. The Lamberts have recently just moved into a ridiculously nice 2-story house in a suburban neighborhood. An impressive, albeit unrealistic feat, given Renee is a stay-at-home mom and her husband Josh is a high school teacher. Things seem a little strange in the house, but they hit ahead when one of their sons, Dalton, randomly goes into a coma. We know it likely has to do with a supernatural entity he encountered in the attic the night before, but his parents have no idea. When doctors aren't able to figure out a cause of the coma after 3 months, the Lamberts bring him home, and when they do, tons of intense paranormal happenings begin to occur. After discovering a bloody handprint on Dalton's sheets, and Renee has someone appear in her bedroom, they make an executive decision to move out of the house. A rare decision, as I feel in most haunted house stories or possession stories, they say, whatever, we'll just keep living here. So not only is this a subversion of expectations in itself, we very quickly learn by an encounter with a ghost dancing to Tiny Tim's Tiptoe Through the Tulips that the house wasn't what was haunted. It was the family themselves. With a final encounter with the canonically named lipstick-faced demon, Josh's mom advised them to call a medium. To see if their house is haunted, 2 people show up first named Specs and Tucker to investigate the place. Once they confirm that it is haunted, they call in Elise Rayner, portrayed by Lynn Shay. She is easily the best part of this series, and brings a huge shift after her introduction. No longer is this a random haunt afflicted on their family, as it turns out Dalton has been, now get this, astral projecting every time he goes to sleep. Astral projection is a phenomena that describes a person's soul leaving their physical body to travel to a different plane of existence while they are asleep. It's a concept that has existed since basically the beginning of time and has been hotly debated on whether it's real or not. When Dalton astral projects, he visits a world called the Further. This is a realm meant as a transitional space for those that die to someplace else. However, souls get lost here. Dalton got lost when he astral projected, and a demon kidnapped him in the Further. The longer Dalton is away from his body, the weaker this connection to his body gets. The demon is hoping that once this connection is broken, it will be able to inhabit his body. This is why other ghosts have been seen in the house too, as Dalton being in the Further is inviting them in. Dalton acquired this power from his father, which is why Josh's mom knows Elise. He astral projected so much when he was younger that something similar started to happen to him, with a ghost called the Bride in Black wanting to inhabit Josh's body. They hypnotized him to get Josh to forget about the Further and stop astral projecting, as if he did it anymore, the Bride in Black would possess him. However, he has to astral project if he wants to find Dalton and bring him back to his body. Off the bat, these forms of possession basically contradict themselves if you give it even a little bit of thought. A demon literally kidnaps Dalton's soul to wear down the link between his soul and body to possess him, but a regular ghost is able to possess Josh without needing to weaken the link between his soul and body? Why is that the case? Regardless, the explanation for the Further and the way it exists was groundbreaking for its time, and even 16 years later is extremely cool. What happens when we die? The question of the ages, one that has been asked for centuries now. The idea of giving that question a palpable space is interesting. I really like how it has nothing to do with any form of religion too, something I feel is rare for movies with possession, usually linking to Christianity of some kind. Ghosts can either pass on, or they interact with the real world because they want to inhabit a new body for a second chance at life. The reason we've been seeing ghosts so far is because Dalton has been astral projecting this entire time, which is creating a door for them to show up in the real world. Then, once we actually see the Further, you can understand why spirits could get lost in the Further, given it's a black void with scattered mist and almost nothing inside of it. Some parts of it even have a liminal aesthetic to them, like the now iconic red door. However, the Further starts to fall apart pretty quickly after we've encountered it. There is a very cool, ominous segment where ghosts play out a tragic murder that occurred in Josh's home years ago. They seem to be dressed from around the 40s or 50s, so this hints that time doesn't work linearly in the Further. This cool segment is immediately followed up with Josh fist fighting a ghost. The way their fight ends is even stupider than the concept of fighting a ghost.
Get away from me!
He finds his son, who, even though he's chained up, the chains aren't actually locked, so he just snaps them right off. No problem at all. Then we get a better look at the lipstick-faced demon, and this better look kind of ruins it. It doesn't look remotely as terrifying as it did in the jump scare, and despite having a giant finger glove similar to Freddy Krueger's, he doesn't use it and also uses the Force. In fact, all he does is use the Force, pushing people around. I guess his similarities to Darth Maul go past just his appearance. And then he just lets them leave? This demon spent actual months keeping this child in chains, and the chains weren't locked, and it put up zero fight when the two of them are leaving? You just wasted months of time, man. All he does when they go to leave is just kind of stare intensely at them. It does come back later and try to catch Dalton. There is a strong asterisk on try. It kind of just crawls at him menacingly. It also looks really bad CGI. After leaving the lair, Josh and Dalton get lost in the Further, so Renee starts calling out to them. But this accidentally calls a ton of ghosts to start coming into the real world en masse. All this culminates in a very hectic and tense final act, which helps you forget about some of the goofiness. Ultimately, Josh and Dalton return to their bodies. Or do they? The film ends with Elise taking a photo, realizing Josh isn't himself. It's actually the Bride in Black in his body. Immediately when she finds this out, Josh chokes and kills Elise. It's a phenomenal twist, but one that puts the sequel into a bit of a pickle. Elise was the most interesting character Insidious had in its cast. Now she's dead. And Elise was really the only thing explaining the further to the cast because no one else understood it. We also have a bit of a problem with the further itself, as it's hard to really imagine what else they could do to build upon its mythology. I think the hardest spot to be in for the sequel is that Renee knows Josh is the bride in black because she found the camera with the photo Elise took. So where is this sequel even gonna go? Before we can talk about Insidious 2, I'd like to talk a bit more about the first one. We've already discussed the further and how it's an amazing concept, so we won't talk much further on that. Using Tiptoe Through the Tulips as the anthem for the lipstick-faced demon was an amazing choice, as it's the last one Tiny Tim ever performed. For those that don't know, he was singing this song on stage when he collapsed, dying later that day. So not only is the song creepy with its usage, but the song itself has some unsettling history to it. Aiding to the music choice is the phenomenal soundtrack composed by Joseph Bishara. The tracks all heighten the experience a lot. Sometimes it even feels like the instruments, and especially the violins, are wailing. The composer is also the lipstick-faced demon, which is cool. Another fun little detail is Josh's mom is named Lorraine, likely as a nod to Lorraine Warren, who James Wan would make a movie about directly after Insidious in the form of The Conjuring. Although, unfortunately, I don't think Insidious was really made to be watched more than once. A lot of the scares in the film were created by building up tension and then breaking it by surprising the audience, usually followed with a loud sound effect of some kind. While the absolutely iconic scare with the lipstick-faced demon is still effective and amazing to this day, a lot of scares in the film really do not work as well if you watch the movie again. The scene with the boy dancing to Tiptoe Through the Tulips is masterful no matter how many times you watch it, and is ruined because after the first time, it's just a boy hopping out of a closet giggling. I think on rewatches too, it doesn't help that Renee is clearly not at all scared by this boy. Their conversation with Dalton is super hectic and freaky the first time, but on future watches, the ghosts all look like people with way too much makeup. Dalton bass boosts everyone away, and then he bitch slaps the fuck out of the paranormal guys.
Leave this body now!
And the goofiness of the confrontation with the lipstick-faced demon becomes laughable on future watches. The one thing that absolutely gets the most ruined with rewatches is the reveal that the bride in black is in Josh, mostly because of the choking scene. At the end of the movie, Josh is screaming. I'm talking yelling at the top of his lungs. We saw earlier in the film that the kitchen where Dalton, Renee, and Josh's mom are is connected to the living room where Elise and Josh are. There is absolutely no way in such a small house where the two rooms are connected to each other that Josh would not be heard screaming as loud as he can. One thing I always forget about with this film is that there are actually two kids outside of Dalton because they really don't do anything. Callie makes sense. I mean, she's a literal baby. Obviously, she isn't going to have much to do, but Foster is actually so underutilized, it's hard to even call him a character. In fact, both of them are so underused that they actually just completely vanish from the movie later on, with them being gone, explained through a single line.
Your other children are with Lorraine, right?
Yeah, they are.
I mean, they're Dalton's siblings. Why couldn't they be more of an active part of the story? Especially Foster. Your brother's in a coma. They don't even appear in the resolution of the film when Lorraine is with the Lamberts and Dalton wakes up. Lorraine is a single mom. Where are the children? I know that's a bit of complaints and critiques, but I do still think the first Insidious is a fun watch. Dare I say, a good movie too. It's certainly no masterpiece, but it undoubtedly revolutionized its genre, and it's got some moments in it that have stuck in people's minds for over a decade. If I was to tier list this movie, because I like to tier list things, I would put it in the B tier. Insidious got its second chapter 3 years later in 2013. While Rotten Tomatoes ranks it very low, a lot of fans seem to really like this one. So let's see what it's all about. The second movie opens with a pretty necessary scene, and one that is probably the only natural way for this movie to start. We open with Josh as a kid, and learn how they met Elise. as well as a tiny bit more about the ghost that's been haunting them. With the title card, we find ourselves transported to days after the first Insidious ends. Josh is under investigation for killing Elise, so the family has relocated to Lorraine's house. Foster and Callie are in the story again, but let's see how long they're here for. Insidious 2 manages to do what most direct sequels struggle with, and that is make what happened before work in this film. I'm looking at you, Halloween Ends. Renee knows deep down that Josh was responsible for Elisa's murder. However, she knew he wouldn't do that, and she saw the photo of the bride in black who she recognized from Josh's childhood photos. She does her best to believe the bride in black is not in Josh and that he didn't kill Elise because she wants to go back to having a normal life. It creates a very interesting internal conflict of wanting to believe her husband and wanting the stuff with the further to end when it's not really her husband in there. And unfortunately for her, supernatural events start to happen near immediately on their first night at Lorraine's. Which, also, for the sake of not getting confused with regular Josh, I'm gonna refer to him as Bride Josh in this movie. Dalton very quickly clocks that something isn't right with their dad, and for some reason, Bride Josh is interacting and talking to a ghost that's in their house. Lorraine quickly recruits Elise's team, Specs and Tucker, to help out. I didn't mention them much for the first movie because they kind of were only there to be comedic relief. Take one of these many stupid clips of them as an example.
Hunt a ninja bear.
Now that Elise is gone, it's time for Dumb and Dumber to pull their weight. I'm pretty confident they will get their time to shine in this film. They very quickly get to business, as they show us that time does not flow linearly in the further, since young Josh can be seen talking to older Josh on one of their tapes. After this huge revelation, they very quickly give up on doing anything and try summoning Elise's spirit to help them. And when that doesn't work, they call in Carl. Carl is an old work partner of Elise's and meant to act as our ghost guide in this movie. He was apparently a part of helping John as a kid, but just wasn't mentioned in the first film, I guess. He is unfortunately less interesting in Elise in nearly every single way. His way of communicating with ghosts is rolling dice, like he's at a casino.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it.
He also randomly touches something to see the history of it.
The prophecy is true.
He never does that again. So we're meant to believe that he's a psychic, but we never really see him using psychic powers, and his actual way of communicating with ghosts, he even admits to being very 50-50.
I suppose I should have explained this isn't an exact science. Sometimes contact can't be made.
After this, the movie diverges into two different plot lines. Storyline A follows Josh and Renee, where Bride Josh is being manipulated by the ghost of a white woman to kill his kids. Storyline B follows Lorraine, Specs, Tucker, and Carl as they go around Scooby-Dooing their way to discover the origins of the Bride in Black. Both of these plot lines are unfortunately incredibly boring. Nothing happens in Storyline A for most of the movie, because it has to wait for Storyline B to uncover the truth of the Black Bride, which becomes obvious by about the 40-minute mark what that origin and truth is. You see, the Bride in Black isn't actually a bride, he's a man named Parker Crane. Parker Crane was forced to cross-dress by his mother, who wanted a girl, despising and abusing him for being born a boy. After years of mistreatment from his mother, it left a permanent scar on him, resulting in him luring many women in to murder them. When he'd killed them, he would cross-dress as a bride, dressed in black. It's implied that these murders were caused by the ghost of his mom manipulating him. He found himself at a hospital that Josh's mom worked at and met Josh one day. Once Parker died, he found himself in the further. Parker desired a second chance to live, to be able to actually be a boy and have a loving mother. So he pursues the boy he met at the hospital in hopes of taking his body one day. Of course, as he got close to possessing Josh, they hypnotized him to forget the further. Parker spent years waiting for Josh to travel again so he'd have the opportunity to take his body. Now that he's finally got his time to rejoin the living, he is willing to do whatever he has to do to keep Josh's body. It's a twist that has proven to be pretty divisive as time has progressed, with some reading that this character's writing is transphobic. I don't really think that's the case though, as it feels like Parker Crane is clearly inspired by Norman Bates of Psycho, a character who by all means is cisgender, but dresses as his mother to kill people. It is usually a way of becoming the person that inflicted this trauma on you to do bad deeds. When the storylines finally converge, the movie does start to get a bit better, especially once we finally get to the further again. For some reason, a ghost shows up and tells Josh he wants your baby? Then we learn that Josh was the ghost that broke into the house in the first Insidious movie, which is a pretty cool twist. It is then immediately made goofy by him fist fighting Morbius, because Morbius was the ghost that wanted his baby. Elise appears, ending the fight by psychic blasting him through a window. Despite being reintroduced in such a goofy way, it is incredibly refreshing to have the best character in the series back again. Turns out that she had passed on and left to further, but came back because she heard his voice. Okay, I feel like they didn't need to make that clear. It kind of makes her being here feel like an asspull when it wasn't before. This makes this sweet moment feel really cheap, and also makes it hollow by, after revealing this, having Elise just info dump how to beat the bride in black. The movie resolves in a scene that almost feels like it's straight from a drug trip, where Elise kills the ghost of Parker's mom, even though both of them are dead. Take a look at what I mean. When this scene happened, I was kind of just in shock. It feels very lackluster when compared to the hectic ghost invasion of the previous film, and it's also a little confusing because somehow killing Parker's mom makes the bride in black leave? What? Josh wasn't possessed by Parker's mom, he was possessed by the bride. Why did killing Parker's mom get rid of the possession? The movie implies that Elise killed the memory of Parker's mom in his memories, which in turn let his soul move on, but I'll be so for real, that makes no fucking sense. It was, again, Parker that wanted to possess Josh, not Parker's mom. The film wastes no time explaining this, or even giving us a resolution with the Lamberts for that matter. Instead, it quickly moves to Dalton and Josh getting hypnotized to forget the further. Then it moves to Specs and Tucker going to visit a house with a girl in a similar situation to Dalton. Elise's spirit is there, somehow not in the further anymore, and she also sees something in the room that we never see. It's another cliffhanger ending, ooh! Also, Jenna Ortega is here, and she can see ghosts. I will say, I watched Insidious 2 for the 4th time while writing this video, and that could have jaded a lot of my insights on the film. I did used to like this movie, but after my second watch, I liked it less, and I've liked it less every single time. Now, it's pretty clear that Insidious 2 is a downgrade on all fronts. While the budget has definitely gone up, and you can feel that, the writing as a whole is just bad in this one. Renee does nothing in this film, which is a shame because she was the main character in the first one. Her panic to figure out what was going on with her kids was really gripping and interesting. She wants what's best for her family, but we don't get to see any of that in this movie because the kids just are not in the film. They set Renee up perfectly to have a great conflict of doubting her husband and trying to deal with him potentially being a murderer, but they just neglect it. Despite being something that seems like it was going to be very important, it's literally mentioned like maybe twice. Instead, we just see her get the shit beat out of her for most of the movie. As I kind of just hinted at, Insidious 2 has a worse writing problem with the kids than the first movie did. Of course, in the first film, Dalton was the only one that mattered, with Foster and Callie being basically out of the picture. In this movie, none of the kids are important, until the literal end when Dalton smacks his dad in the head with a baseball bat. Outside of this scene, they almost might as well not even be in the movie. Oh, also, they have a babysitter that they never mention at all. She just kind of shows up and drops them off, which I guess we're maybe meant to believe she was the reason Foster and Callie weren't in the resolution of the last film. Whatever, man. Random bullshit, go! This film really feels the lack of Elise. Carl just isn't interesting, and Specs and Tucker never stop being comedic relief, even in the resolution of the film. Like, Tucker jumps in and ruins what is an emotional moment between the family. It often feels like the film wants to be a horror comedy, especially with some of its scares. Which, speaking of the scares, the film takes the biggest downgrade from the first film in this department. This movie just isn't scary, or even really remotely tense. I mean, the supernatural aspects in this movie feel like a joke most of the time. We have the bride in black, who seems like a super interesting antagonist, and then replace the bride with Parker's mom?
You You just summoned your mom.
So now our antagonist is much weaker, and Parker's mom for most of the movie is just a white woman with a lot of makeup on. In one of her most tense scenes in the movie, she ruins it by screaming and actually slapping the fuck out of Renee. Crazy how this white lady did more damage than the fucking demon in the first movie. Can we talk about that? Why is this lady so much stronger than an actual demon? She also later pogs while force pushing people out of a room. And grabs Josh by his throat as they slowly levitate across a room. Another issue is that when we get to actually see who Parker is, he's just an old white guy that randomly jumps at Josh. I mean, shit, I'd probably be scared if an old man jumped at me randomly too, but coupled with the weak old man scream, it kind of just feels funny. And we also have an army of white women ghosts levitating threateningly towards Dalton. I think the reason this movie works so less in the scare department is because it doesn't take its time. The first movie had a gradual buildup, one that lasted so long and made us finally finding out about the lipstick-faced demon super worth it. And this movie, we come into it knowing about the further, we know who the antagonist ghost is, kind of, until the mom is introduced, and nothing in this film is as threatening as a demon, unless you're afraid of white people. I think what really drags down this film is a lot of the ghost sequences are nullified by the fact that we know nothing in the further can actually harm anything in the living. As Elise said in the first movie, we're stronger than them because we're alive. Well, I guess with one exception. There are two things in this movie that can be scary, but it's more like they get under your skin. The first is its surprising body horror. As John is inhabited by somebody who's dead, his body also begins to die and fall apart. But the film doesn't really lean into that much. He kind of just gets progressively paler. The other thing that is unnerving is the sheer amount of abuse and violence present in it. Park's mom abuses him, and it's shown plainly on screen. And Josh wants to murder his family in scenes that are super reminiscent of The Shining. It's tense, and you think it would ruin the entire family. Like your dad was trying to kill you and your mom with all of his effort, and your mom was doing everything she could to save you. Then you see your dad beating the absolute shit out of your mom? Hell, one of the kids had to step in to help. It seems like it would be super traumatic. Instead, they get over it in a matter of seconds in the film. As a whole, Insidious 2 is a pretty disappointing follow-up to what was a fairly original and good first film. It is still entertaining, as a lot of the moments in it are really funny, especially with a group of friends, but I just don't think it was trying to be funny. It's just not as good. If I was to tier list it, I would probably put it in C tier. Insidious 3 would come out 2 years later in 2015, and while I'm sure many of you would expect the film to pick up after the cliffhanger ending with kid Jenna Ortega, it doesn't. In fact, I wouldn't expect to ever see a resolution to this cliffhanger. Insidious Chapter 2 is 13 years old, guys, and despite the series coming up on its 6th installment, this scene is never addressed. Again, it's frustrating, especially since 5 and 6 take place way after the events of Insidious 2. It makes you wonder, what was the point in rushing the ending of 2, forcing past the Lamberts to get to this cliffhanger if nothing's gonna come from it? Actually, you know what? I think I changed my mind. This is probably a D tier movie. Insidious Chapter 3 is when they realize they've kind of ridden themselves into a corner by killing Elise in the first movie, since they can't really make sequels without her character being involved. They could go with Carl, but again, Carl just isn't as interesting as Elise is. So to remedy the problem, the third Insidious takes place 3 years before the first movie, back when Elise was still alive. Elise had been out of the medium game for a year at this point of the story, as when her husband died, she traveled to the further to try and find him, but was met with the bride in black. You see, the bride is hellbent on killing Elise for ruining its chances at possessing Josh. This is an interesting detail meant to better pave the way for the events and eventual death of Elise in the first film, as it redefines her visiting them. She helped the Lamberts knowing it would kill her. However, in this film, she is very scared of interacting with the further and ghosts at all. We see how serious it is in the film's opening, where Elise, who helps anybody she can, turns someone away who's asking for help. That someone is Quinn Brenner, who is trying to contact her mom as she's having trouble moving on from her death. Quinn doesn't listen to Elise's warning, one that stuck with me as the trailers aired when I was a kid.
If you call out to one of the dead, all of them can hear you.
It's an incredibly creepy thought, and despite the warning, Quinn immediately tries to reach out again. Her attempts to reach out attach something to her, which distracts her at an audition to a theater school, and then distracts her enough to make her get hit by a car. She is rushed to the hospital, briefly dying and traveling to the further, where she comes face to face with the ghost that's been following her. After 3 weeks, Quinn is able to go home, but both of her legs are super beat up, and she is put in a double cast. Basically, she cannot move on her own at all. So a lot of the time, she is stuck exactly where she is. And this contributes to Insidious 3 actually being potentially on par with the first one as far as scares go. The atmosphere is almost reminiscent of the games for Five Nights at Freddy's, where Quinn a lot of the time has to just sit there, helpless and defenseless for the paranormal occurrences that happen around her. Another thing that really aids the film's scares is its shot composition. Shots will linger on doorways and empty spaces, hinting that something is there that we can't see. There are sequences of something watching Quinn from afar. You'll see things in the background of shots, but no jump scare will come. That's not to say there aren't jump scares in the movie. I mean, what is an Insidious film without its incredibly loud scares? But a lot of the spooky sequences feel pretty well crafted compared to the last film. I think it helps too that it takes its time. We don't just immediately get to creepy shit like we did in Insidious 2. It slowly creeps up on you. Many of the scares stick with you like they did in the first film because they are just so long lasting. Like the sequence where the ghost flips Quinn on the floor, where she literally cannot move because of her legs. It slowly paces around the room, closing the blinds, the door, and her laptop to remove all forms of light. That's scary. That's scary shit. And probably one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, where Quinn wakes up to find herself on the floor above and the ghost wheelchairs her to its fucking room, where she sees herself but with no face, no feet, or hands. So then her dad comes to save her, and they see the ghost jump out the window. But that was all a ruse to try and pull Quinn out the window. It's just so cool. The movie does itself a lot of favors with making Quinn sit in this double cast. It's very much a horror movie trope where you're like, oh, get out of there. Oh, don't open that closet. Oh, leave that room. What if the character can't do any of those things? Just actually cannot move. Nearly all of the scares in this movie also progress the plot forward somehow, which is something I can't really say about a lot of the previous two films. Quinn gets attacked by something which cracks their ceiling, so they go to the floor above them in their apartment complex to find out that something is in there, later leading into the fact that this is where the ghost lives. Of course, in the scene where the ghost flips her and turns all the lights off, it hurts her neck, so she's even more immobile than before, and this is when her dad goes to find Elise. After the wheelchair scene in the 5th floor, her dad calls Specs and Tucker for help. Scares are not without purpose in this movie. I also have to give it to the sound design in the film. Later in this movie, Quinn gets possessed, breaking her casts off by kicking the leg of a bed. It looks and sounds brutal, and what makes it worse is once the casts are off, since her legs are still broken to bits, they crack and snap with every one of her footsteps. It's awful to watch, and it just makes your skin crawl with the sounds. The scares, the shot composition, and the sound design are all elevated here, but they're not alone, as the further is actually the best it's been in any of the films so far. Every time we're there, it feels incredibly dangerous instead of just some void. It absolutely is not a place someone that is alive should be. We get some further elaboration on some time shenanigans stuff too, like Elise finds her way into the Lambert's house from the first film, or the bride in black chokes her in the same chair she died in. As for the story, much like Insidious 2, there are two plot lines in this film. The first is what's going on with Quinn and her hauntings, and the other is Elise trying to overcome her fear so she can help Quinn. Unlike Insidious 2, where it felt like the two stories were fighting for screen time, and one of them basically did not matter, in Insidious 3 they complement each other and feed into each other, making their convergence in the last act feel very natural. Insidious 3 also shows how Specs and Tucker met Elise. Before they were a trio helping families, they were a duo that ran a popular website where they hunted ghosts. Even though they play a bigger role in this movie than the other two, they are still pretty much only comedic relief. I mean, when are we going to take these guys seriously? Are we going to take these guys seriously? I will say, though, that the movie does take its ghost very seriously. As while The Bride in Black was a really interesting concept, most of the movie followed Parker's mom, who was just a really white woman that loved slapping people. This film has an actual demon, similar to the first film, and its name is the Wheezing Demon. A lot of the time, it feels like it poses more of a threat than the bride, and even the lipstick-faced demon, especially when we learn that the ghost doesn't even want to possess her to live again. It just wants to kill her. It interacts with the real world and causes real damage to both people and physical spaces. All of this to show again and again how much of a hack the lipstick-faced demon is. Get better, little bro. Seriously, getting ratioed by a white woman and a guy who can't breathe. This isn't to say this film doesn't have goofy parts to it. Like, Elise says some Marvel-like dialogue and then beats the shit out of the Bride in Black.
Come on, bitch.
It's weirdly action-packed. They're trying really hard to make Elise a badass, and it kind of works. I'm all for it, but it just feels super unserious. Thankfully, there are only 2 instances of force pushing compared to the handful from previous movies. This is all to say that I wasn't expecting this film to be any good, because this film isn't directed by James Wan. It's actually directed by Leigh Whannell, who wrote the first 2 films. It was his directorial debut, and I was worried it would be lacking, but instead I have to say he did a pretty good job. However, there are still some faults to it. The first one that was pretty noticeable is that the classic Insidious track, the one with the violins, is just not in this movie, which is a shame because that really does add to the atmosphere. Elise's struggles with reconnecting with being a psychic are cool, but her death to the Bride in Black seems a little too predetermined. By that I mean that Insidious 3 was phrasing it as if the Black Bride was always going to kill Elise in the first Insidious, but that just isn't the case. In the first film, the only reason Bride Josh chokes Elise is because Elise realizes that Josh is possessed, and she's the only one to realize. Leaving Elise alive risks the bride being kicked out of Josh. Parker doesn't want this, given it's been waiting 20-some odd years to be able to live again. So, the bride kills Elise to protect itself, much like it tried to do to Carl, Specs, and Tucker once they all realized, and then later went after the family to try to protect itself. The writing in Insidious 3 is trying to convince us that the bride had it out for Elise the entire time, but that just doesn't really make much sense with the context of the other 2 films. Another thing that doesn't really work with the writing is, again, the dividing of the film into 2 storylines. While it does a much better job than Insidious 2 did at following 2 differing perspectives, and both storylines do have weight to them, it feels like more could still be done with both. Quinn's household is fractured after the death of her mother, and it doesn't really feel that way. They show you for a scene or 2 that stuff in the household is rough, but then they speed things along so we can get to the ghost quicker. In fact, a good portion of the film seems to forget that the family was even fractured in the first place. Elise's storyline, on the other hand, is good, and it really does add a ton of depth to an already interesting character. I think Elise was the best character in Insidious 1 and 2, but Insidious 3 pushes her far past what any other character could ever be in the series. Although for another issue, the dialogue stands out a lot of times for being really bad. I mentioned earlier how there are some Marvel-esque lines, but you can really feel how strained some of the dialogue is truly with Quinn. A lot of her lines are pretty obnoxious. You can tell that Lee wasn't quite sure how to write a teenage girl that lost her mother, and that comes off very clearly, especially with her characterization. She's a theater kid, a book addict, a blogger, a vegetarian, and is basically a stereotype of every one of those character types, somehow. I feel the writing with her character as a whole is pretty weak. This is gonna sound crazy, but we needed to spend a lot more time with her before she got hit by a car, because after she gets hit, the writing staggers a lot in favor of making the horror stronger. Because of this, despite how strong this movie feels overall, Quinn ends up being one of the weaker protagonists in the series. Also, we're 3 films deep in the series, and they cannot stop having a sibling character that is basically useless. At multiple times in the movie, I forgot that Quinn had a brother. There's also a romance interest, Hector, who vanishes from the movie despite living literally a few rooms down from her, and Quinn's best friend Maggie may as well have not been in the movie. I also feel like this movie has a similar problem with its demon that Insidious 1 ended up having. By that I mean, in the later half, we see a little too much of it, and even though it's a demon, it's just an old guy in a hospital gown with a breathing mask on, which is a lot less cool than a demon with hooves and stuff. I feel like maybe they should have showed a little less of it, but whatever, you know, it is what it is. Even still, despite its flaws, Insidious Chapter 3 actually feels like the dark horse of the series. One that I feel is as good as the first film. In some cases, and I may get some flack for this in the comments, I feel like it can be better than the first film, which is very refreshing given how goofy and bad the second film was, and unlike the first two, it actually has a resolution. Quinn finally gets to hear from her mom, and her mom helps to save her from the wheezing demon. Her mom has been watching over her, and asserts she'll continue to watch over her. Elise is able to overcome her fear of dying because she knows one day, no matter what, she will. It's what we all do. Until that day, she wants to help people as much as she can, and she knows when she'll die, she'll be reunited with her husband. With her reignited passion, she pitches to Specs and Tucker that they should join forces. In classic Insidious fashion, the film ends with a cliffhanger, and it's actually the cheapest jump scare in the entire film, with the lipstick-faced demon randomly just showing up. It feels a little like a slap in the face, given how good the other scares were built up to being in this film, but it's fine, I guess. I'll allow them their one cheap jump scare. Insidious 3 is going in the B tier, right with the first film. Hopefully this video can give it some more respect, although I don't know if a lot of people are going to be taking me seriously given how much I'm talking shit about these movies. Well, with that, the bow is tied up, and we have basically the entire Insidious timeline now. We know how Elise met Josh, and that the bride in black threatened her life, so she went into retirement because of Quinn's haunting. She realized people still need her help, and she met Tucker and Specs, deciding to work with them. With the last little cheap jump scare, it's clear this is meant to circle back to the first film, where the lipstick-faced demon is haunting. You would think that now would be the perfect time to go back to the cliffhanger of Insidious 2, so we can see where that goes, but instead, the fourth film in the series goes to pretty much the last place you would expect it to. The fourth film of the franchise is kind of an attempted origin story for Elise. You might wonder what I mean by attempted. So basically there are segments of Elise's childhood in this film, but the majority of the film takes place after Insidious 3 with adult Elise. For Elise's childhood, her family lives at a prison because her father works there. Her dad is not really a good guy and actively abuses her for seeing ghosts. After beating her one night, he put her in the basement, where a ghost asks her to open the door to let it out. When she does, it turns out it isn't a ghost, but a demon with keys for fingers, officially being named Keyface. The demon makes her go into some kind of stasis and then hangs her mom right behind her. This puts Keyface above literally the other 3 ghosts in the series for killing someone without a physical form. Sorry, bride, you've been power crept. After this, we move to the modern day, where Elise has to revisit her childhood trauma after receiving a house call from her childhood home. While the concept is very interesting, and Lin Shaye portrays reliving the trauma extremely well, this film is not very good. Unlike the previous films, where I'd list a bunch of pros and then a bunch of cons individually, this one is such a mixed bag that we're just gonna list them as they come. For starters, our trio are basically the undisputed protagonists. A welcome change. They don't have to worry about sharing large amount of screen times with other people. It's all just Specs, Elise, and Tucker. Much like the previous film, Elise really gets to shine in this movie. And while you may think we're finally going to have time to develop Tucker and Specs, you would be completely wrong. We are 4 movies deep with these characters, and they still only feel like comedic relief. They might actually be more pathetic in this movie than the other films, because they meet Elise's nieces and act like they've never spoken to a woman before.
I'm funny too, a lot of the time. I can also be funny.
Okay. What?
On 2 occasions in the film. This detail was probably included actually in the film to debunk a long-running fan theory that Tucker and Specs were gay lovers, especially sparked from a scene in the last movie where Specs puts his hand on Tucker's thigh. And while I guess that's fine and all, can we have them interact with women a little better? It just feels like rubbing salt in the wound for characters who are already down and deserve a lot more depth that we are actively avoiding giving them. The most they do in this entire film is play a real-life game of Phasmophobia, where Elise is in the room while Tucker and Specs watch from their RV. You know. You remember the RV, right? Their ghost hunting one. Oh wait, it wasn't in the first movie? Or the second movie? That's strange, especially since this movie canonically takes place a day before Elise appears at the first Insidious film. More on that soon. I got a lot to say about that. Going back to Elise's nieces, one of them, named Imogen, possesses the same abilities that Elise has. It looks like they may be setting her up to be a successor for future sequels, since again, they really kicked themselves in the shin by killing Elise, although that's not the case. Imogen is brought in to pretty much do one thing before the ghost chains her up and walks her like a dog. And then all she does in the resolution of the film is kiss Specs on the mouth, which, mind you, I think is a little strange in hindsight because the person that wrote the script is actually the one that plays Specs. So, did Bro write himself in a kiss scene? I don't know, man. We didn't see any of her in the 5th film or the trailers for the 6th film, so much like the cliffhanger of the 2nd film, don't count on Imogen coming back. One thing this film does have going for it is an extremely sudden subversion of expectations, in which Elise finds what you assume is a ghost, but it's actually a person chained up in the basement. The guy who called Elise and the boys, yeah, he kidnapped someone. It's a super crazy twist for the series, one that really shocked me on my first viewing of the film, and even still catches me a bit off guard on my second viewing. The guy who kidnapped the girl draws a gun, and in self-defense, Specs fucking kills the guy by dropping a cabinet on him? Holy shit. The film seems to forget about this though, entirely. There's no police investigation, and despite just killing somebody, Specs doesn't seem too bothered by it. Instead, he flirts and jokes with Imogen the day after he killed somebody. Did the writer give himself a super cool scene and put a scene of him kissing somebody in? Is he trying to make himself look like a Chad this film? I'm on to you, Lee Whannell. I'm on to you. The ghost for this film also is a mixed bag. I would go to say that Keyface is probably the strongest demon or apparition of the series so far. It is extremely present in the real world, not seeming to care about the further or needing a physical vessel. It can just show up when it pleases, leave when it pleases, and kidnap souls from the real world and bring them to the further, something we even see it do to Elise. It is able to do real damage and harm, like we saw it casually hang somebody. It has keys that can just turn off people's voices, and it can even psychic blast people in the real world. These pushes seem so strong that it makes whoever it hits immobile, as we saw happen with 2 people in this film. I'm guessing here because every time it does it to the person who is pushed, they just don't move or defend themselves. It's a ghost that just does not give a shit about the further. Despite how much damage it can do, unlike the previous 3 ghosts, this one has 0 motivation, and that's pretty weird considering what it does in this film. By that I mean it somehow convinces people to kidnap women, it doesn't possess them, but it gets in their head somehow. It started with Elise's dad, who kidnapped and murdered a lady. Elise saw this person when she was younger and assumed she was a ghost, but much like the modern day, this was actually a real person. It is also hinted he kidnapped several women over the years. Once the women have been murdered, this demon takes their souls to the further and chains them up in prison cells. He also again walks 2 of them like they're fucking dogs. So why does he do this? How does he convince these people to kidnap without possessing them? Does he just want an army of white women? All of these are great questions that we never even remotely get the answer to. Despite being so strong, this demon just seems to act with no real goal in mind, which is really peculiar. The lipstick-faced demon wanted to inhabit a body to be able to bring pain to the real world. The bride in black wanted a body to be able to have a chance at life again. The wheezing man wanted to possess people to make them suffer. Keyface has a pet play fetish? I don't know, man. It has a goal for a split second, which apparently is to have Elise open red doors to let more demons into the real world, because as a kid she opened a red door that let this thing out.
You are more powerful than you know. I want you to help me open all the doors.
But it just never goes anywhere. I think what makes all of this about Keyface even more frustrating is how they defeated him. He can take souls to the further, he can hang people, he can psychic blast people, he can do so much. And he gets defeated by Elise's mom appearing and force pushing the demon so hard it ragdolls while it's flying away.
Hands off my little girl.
It was by far the funniest thing to happen in the entire series, but it's not a good thing because this is supposed to be a serious, powerful moment. How did the strongest ghost in the series get soloed by somebody's mom? Also, why does he look like Jeff the Killer did a bunch of meth? When I was watching this film, I just could not unsee some fucked up weird Jeff the Killer, and Jeff the Killer is already fucked up and weird. Elise's mom reappearing really bugged me because it felt like a less interesting recreation of the last film's ending. Demon is about to fuck us up. Let me do something that brings my mom back real quick. It worked in the third film because the entire movie was building off Quinn wanting to connect with her mother, but Elise shows pretty much zero signs of wanting to see her mother again. Elise has a brother who admittedly does more than Foster and Alex from the previous films, but even still is kind of a nothing burger. He does nothing as a kid, nothing as a teenager, and then as an adult he breaks into his childhood home to steal back a whistle that he lost like 50 or 60 years ago. Sure, whatever floats your boat, man. As for the scares, they're not the best in this film. Come on, I'm sure you saw that coming. It tends to either have cleverly set up sequences that result in very, very loud sounds or moments. It always happens. Or just extremely random, cheap, and loud noises in general. It's easily the lowest point for the franchise at this point in time, which is a bummer after the third film, which felt like a return to grace. However, as we'll talk about when we get to the Red Door, it's definitely not the worst the franchise has been. The only part the film felt like it succeeded in was how it handled Elise. Getting to see Lin Shaye be the lead actress of this film, who was 74 years old at the time, is something that just doesn't happen. It is incredibly rare to see someone at that age leading a film, no less a horror movie. It was refreshing, and it did give more depth to her character, but also it made a lot of choices that almost contradict lots of previous details in the series. For example, this movie once again changes Elise's motivation for being a psychic. In the first film, she was helping people out of the goodness of her heart. In the third film, she stopped helping people out of fear of dying, but goes back to it because helping people was what she felt she was made to do. And in this film, she helps people because she watched her mom die to a demon. I feel like the last film, with her motivation being she was afraid of dying, but finds love for it because she knows she's going to die anyways, makes perfect sense. So she does it out of the good of her heart. Why are we making her mom a motivation for her now? This probably should have been mentioned way before. We're 4 movies in and we're just now learning that Elise's mom was killed by a demon and it is a big reason she's being a psychic. Elise also has some weird new powers that she has never had before, and much like Carl's weird hand grab moment where he understood the history of an object, Elise has something like that only shows up one time. The most notable to me was when teenage Elise psychic blasts her visions into other people's heads, like by grabbing her dad's head to show him how he's going to die. This is a feat we never see her do ever again. I've been complaining a lot, but I think nothing bugged me in this film more than what happened in the falling action, which was when Elise is trying to guide people through the further back to their real bodies. Elise opens a door from the further to Dalton in the first movie and leaves it open. While on the surface, this is of course another circle back to the first movie, just like the cliffhanger of 3, but unlike the third film, this ruins the first one. Keyface wanted Elise because it told her it wanted her to open more doors, to let more demons into the real world. Right here in this scene, she opens a door to the attic. In this attic, we know Dalton encountered the lipstick-faced demon as we hear its signature creaking sounds in the first film. So this makes it seem like it's actually Elise's fault that the lipstick-faced demon even shows up at the Lamberts' house. Leaving the door open is totally uncharacteristic for her because if this is the case, she actively brought harm to someone's family. But it has to be the case due to what Keyface says Elise has the power to do, and what happens during this scene in the first Insidious film, which almost ruins Elise's character. And this makes almost no sense because she doesn't mention it in the first or second film. She doesn't apologize for forgetting to close the door. She's just all honky-dory, even though it's, by the logic of the fourth film, her fault that the lipstick-faced demon even bothered the Lamberts at all. As you can imagine, there is another cliffhanger in this movie, and it's another thing that leads into Insidious 1 again. Not only is this a bit cheap, given it's exactly what the third film did, but it's also repeated scenes we've already seen again. By this, I mean it's very clear they just used the same shots again from the first movie, and they just superimposed a new, cheap, lame jump scare that wasn't in the first film on to make it seem like it was new. Not only does this film imply Elise is the reason the Lamberts got haunted by Lipstick Face, it also feels like it forgot how Elise came to the Lamberts in the first movie. In The Last Key, Lorraine calls her and she immediately agrees to go to the family's home the next day.
Tell Josh I'll be there in the morning.
However, that just isn't what happened. In the first film, Elise sent Specs and Tucker to the house first to see if the house was actually haunted because they get false calls a lot.
She sent us ahead to do some preliminary tests.
Helps weed out the nut jobs.
Then she showed up at a later time when Specs and Tucker confirmed it was haunted.
We can call Elise. Now.
So, what's going on here? Did the writers just forget what happened in the first movie or the series at this point in time? Because this entire film feels like it forgets a lot of how the other movies actually went. All in all, Insidious: The Last Key is a movie that sucks in nearly every way. It was so bad and so inconsistent that it made me appreciate the second film more. So, I'm going to move Insidious 2 back to the C tier, and The Last Key is going to be our D tier film. Now, they, of course, are once again presented with the easy choice of going to that cliffhanger ending in the second film, but no, they instead decide to do something no one saw coming again. Ten years after the release of Insidious 2, despite getting a resolution for the Lamberts, which was rushed, but still a resolution nonetheless, the franchise decided to return back to their family. This film has the longest break between movies, as while every other film had a 3-year break, this one had a 5-year break. With the extra time, that being 2 years, you would think they would come out with an extremely quality movie, but instead, we have by far the worst film in the entire franchise. And let me say this is before I've seen Out of the Further, so there's a chance that movie is worse than this one, but I really feel The Red Door is the bottom of the barrel. The film opens with a funeral for Lorraine, where we learn that the relationship between the family has become very strained over the years. So much, in fact, that Renee and Josh are actually divorced now. As it turns out, because of the hypnosis to forget about the further, it ended up putting such a cloud over Josh's brain that he struggled to be present with his wife and kids. Out the gate, I feel like this is a missed opportunity. Back when this film was coming out, I was under the assumption that because Dalton and Josh were going to forget the further, the family would just be under the assumption that Josh abused his children. After all, they forgot the further, but Josh still attacked the family. I was under the assumption they would think it was him, not a ghost possessing him. Having the hypnosis give Josh's mind fog almost feels strange because we don't really know why this happened. If you think about it, Josh has been hypnotized before and was completely fine for 20 to 30 years. No fog, no issues, no memory problems or anything. Dalton also had been hypnotized and was completely fine. So why did it have such an intense effect on him now? Was it because Carl hypnotized him and not Elise? Was it because Josh is older now? Or was it because it was his second time being hypnotized? Whichever the reason may be, they went a less interesting route than they could have with this story. Instead, they try to explain it as if Josh's dad had an undiagnosed mental disorder of some kind. But in reality, he also could travel to the further. They do their best to try to make you think that Josh's dad is actually a fucked up person for most of the movie, and that is why Josh is this way. The film gets a lot less interesting after this too. In the first film, Dalton had an interest in drawing, and a lot of his clues to his family about his astral projecting were hinted through these drawings. That's why him going off to an art college makes sense. As a part of her teaching style, his professor counts down from 10 to get them into the art zone, but this actually hypnotizes Dalton and acts as a way for him to uncover stuff he's forgotten. Under his first hypnotic state, he draws a red door super intensely. While drawing, his hand is struck by the lipstick-faced demon, which is the less interesting approach I was just talking about. Now, this film had the perfect opportunity to revisit the Bride in Black, because in the second film, the antagonist was more of the bride's mom. The Lamberts in the film technically defeated Parker's mom, not Parker Crane. The return of the lipstick-faced demon is even stranger because, well, why was it not in the second film at all? It returns in this movie because Dalton goes back to the further, but Dalton was in the further in the second movie multiple times. Why was the lipstick-faced demon not in that movie at all? I think what makes the return of the lipstick-faced demon even worse is that despite being the big bad of the movie, bro is just not in it. Instead, Insidious the Red Door is more of a family drama, with the film occasionally remembering that it's supposed to be a horror movie, which is bad because the movie is a god-awful family drama. From the intro, the film looks like it was going to focus a lot more on Josh, but they decided to do the classic Insidious move of splitting the film into two separate storylines, one with Josh and one with Dalton. The two have had a major falling out over the years, but they don't really elaborate on how or why. Dalton is just kind of emo and doesn't like him. For the storylines, Josh is on a journey to figure out what's going on with his brain and to better understand his dad, like we were just talking about. And Dalton is on a journey to remember the details about his coma. Josh's storyline is just not interesting. It has the potential to be, but instead every scene with Josh just has a goofy jump scare. One of which was this ghost crawling at him going like 40 miles per hour. It's fucking crazy. Dalton's storyline is conceptually interesting, but is ruined by several factors. The first is, unfortunately, Ty Simpson's performance is just not good. Despite going through so many emotions in the film, it never really feels like he conveys any. Part of me wonders if this was more of a directing choice rather than Ty Simpson's acting, but even still it results in him being super boring to watch. A popular complaint I saw online is that you can't tell whether Dalton is haunted or lobotomized. The second is Chris, who is commonly agreed upon to be a super annoying and irritating supporting character. All she does in the film is deliver bad or corny dialogue, and her characterization is all over the place. She comes off as nerdy and goofy, but then she pushes Dalton to go to a frat party, breaks into people's rooms there, pushes Dalton to go into the further a few times. The only reason she really feels like she's there is to progress the plot forward for him because he's such a nothing character. And there's another time where she gets threatened by something that we'll talk about soon. The last reason that Dalton's stories just don't work is that he actually takes the entire movie to remember. Josh does too, but we spend a lot less time with him and most of the film is with Dalton, so it feels more frustrating with him. After an hour and 20 minutes, Dalton and Josh finally remember, with 25 minutes of the fucking movie left to spare. Dalton only remembers because after patiently waiting 13 years, the lipstick-faced demon manages to kidnap and possess him. For a moment that's been built up over the course of these last 15 years since the first movie came out, Dalton is possessed for, I kid you not, maybe 10 fucking minutes of the movie. And all that happens while he's possessed is he just kind of looks threateningly at Chris. That's it. The reason Dalton is barely possessed is because Josh somehow travels to the further without any help despite having forgotten about it when he needed help. By being hypnotized the last few times, he finds his son in the demon's lair and helps him leave all in the span of 10 minutes. 15 minutes max, maybe. So we spent an hour and 20 minutes watching a movie, waiting for them to finally remember, and when they do, the plot resolves in 15 minutes. Are you kidding me, dude? Yet again, Insidious is proving that their flagship demon is just a complete joke. This guy actually doesn't fucking do anything, especially when compared to the bride, the wheezing man, and Keyface. Keyface hung somebody. This lipstick face guy kidnaps a child and an adult and he can't keep them in prison. After this encounter, Josh sits in front of the red door to keep it closed, and the writers try to convince us that he's gonna die here for some reason. There's a heartbeat sound effect that fades out and emotional music, but come on, we all know Josh won't die from being in the further for just a few minutes. Dalton was in the further for like 4 or 5 months, and Josh himself survived in the further for probably just as long in Insidious 2. So we have a shitty final encounter with this demon that has been built up forever. We have this fake out scene of Josh supposed to be dying, and then the resolution of the film has Dalton painting over the red door, which somehow closes it. That's it. Credits roll. It's such a quick, underwhelming conclusion that makes the entire film, and in hindsight, the entire saga, completely feel like a waste of time. So the story is weak and boring. The demon is the worst it's been in the series. What about the scares? Well, again, this movie forgets it's a horror film. I think there are only a handful of ghost sequences in the entire runtime of the film, and only one of them is interesting. And it's literally the opening scene, where we see a ghost slowly walking towards Josh's car and vanish. It was such a cool, spooky moment, and they never recreate anything remotely like that. It feels like a scare that was super inspired by It Follows. The rest of the film is laughable in comparison. We have a CT scan scene with Josh, where he's checking to see if he has brain damage. It's claustrophobic, it's intense, and it's again ruined by that ghost shuffling and giggling at 40 miles per hour. For some reason, Josh's dad as a ghost breaks through a window and slams into a closet. Like I said, for a while in the movie, they're trying to convince you that Josh's dad is a bad dude, and he does cause real damage. We see that Josh actually was slammed into the closet, but we never know if him smashing through the glass window was real or not. This makes him seem like a very threatening presence, but as I mentioned, he's actually extremely depressed, and he killed himself thinking that if he did, no one in his family would see the further anymore. Josh never knew his father, and his mom never said he was violent. It was just his ghost being violent for reasons, because they wanted to make you think that Josh actually was abusive or something and it wasn't the Black Bride. I don't fucking know. The stuff with Josh's dad doesn't make any fucking sense. And for the last scare of the film, what is meant to be the crescendo of it all, we have a scene with Josh and Dalton escaping Lipstick Face, and while it isn't intense at all, any tension that could have been there is completely stripped away when we do a close-up zoom on the demon's mouth as it extends farther with really terrible looking CGI. Even without the CGI, the lipstick-faced demon in this film looks a lot less like an otherworldly demon and a lot more like a guy covered in face paint. This movie isn't scary. It just isn't, and it barely has enough attempted scares in it to even really call it a horror movie. What ruins this film even more is that despite being the protagonist of the Insidious series at this point, Elise, Specs, and Tucker are just not in the movie. We see Tucker and Specs in the film, sure, but it's on a YouTube video on a channel they apparently run now. And we do see Elise twice, I'll give you that. The first time is kind of pitiful though. It's just her being filmed for a 60-second segment at a college, which doesn't feel believable to me. Elise was always presented as a person that if you know them, you know her. She seemed to have no wider presence and to actually have an extremely private life. If she was prolific enough to get a 60 seconds segment, then people would have known about her more. It kind of just feels like it's the writer's attempt at going, hey look, we're cool. We know what YouTube is. Although this segment is mainly there to info dump things about the further to Dalton, which are things we as an audience have known for the past like 5 fucking movies. Her second appearance is at the end of the movie, which feels like even more of an asshole than the YouTube video. Elise doesn't really have much to say or do here. The only reason I think she's here is because the writers knew people would be upset if she wasn't in the film. Carl shows up in this film, surprisingly, but not as a major player, or even really as a player at all. He just has a single line at the cemetery. That's it. This could have been the movie they actually gave him time to shine and made him interesting, but they didn't do it. As you can imagine, Callie and Foster again just don't matter in this movie, which is surprising to me because in the first and second movie they really play it up like there's this ghost that wants Callie really bad, but I guess it's fine. It would be weird to make them important pieces in the 5th movie of the franchise, especially when it's about Dalton and Josh. What was weird to me is that despite being our protagonist and a central part of the second film, Renee is just not in this movie. She does not matter to the overall story in the slightest, and that's a big bummer, especially since I think Rose Byrne is actually the best actor in the entire series, followed closely by Lynn Shay. She kills it. Although, I feel like a bigger issue is the further itself, as it acts differently in this movie than it did in the previous 4. In those films, real people couldn't be seen or interacted with in the further. Only ghosts. The only exceptions where you could encounter other people who were astral projecting, like Josh saw Elise, and then he saw himself as a kid. In this film, Dalton sees everyone in the real world in real time. This should not be possible given what we know about the further, but somehow it is for this film. It also doesn't ever feel like the void we've come to know. Instead, it's typically just a dark blue filter on everything. Something else that is really strange is in every other movie, people had to return to their bodies to come back to the real world, while in this film, if they close their eyes and think really hard, they can just pop back to reality. The possession in this film also makes no sense. The lipstick-faced demon was waiting months to be able to possess Dalton and kept him trapped in the further that entire time. How in this movie, after years when that link that he was trying to break restored, was he able to do it in a matter of minutes in this film? I will give the Red Door 2 things. The first is that the classic Insidious music returns after being missing in the last 2 films. And I would say it's even stronger sounding in this movie than the first 2. It was really refreshing to hear it again. The other is that unlike most of the films, this one tries to have a message. It encourages remembering tragic events, even if we don't want to. While this is a nice message, they pound you over the head with it over and over and over again. In fact, Dalton has the most cheesy, stupid, ham-fisted line that shows the writers pretty much had no faith in their audience understanding what this film was trying to say.
You need to get rid of that thing. Burn it, forget about it.
No, forgetting it doesn't work. We need to remember, even the things that hurt.
The film ends with Josh and Dalton hugging for the first time in the entire movie, saying that they love each other after Dalton paints a picture of Josh saving Dalton in the further. With that, the story of the Lamberts is over. Probably. I say probably because there's a post-credit scene, the first of the Insidious franchise, where the painted-over door of the lipstick-faced demon has its lights turn on again, suggesting it isn't done with Dalton just yet. And that's fucking it. That's the fucking movie. Insidious 5 is the first film in the series with no cliffhanger ending, which is fine, but it's the first film in the series that I'm comfortable saying, what even was the fucking point? What were we even doing here? This movie really accomplishes nothing and neglects so many possible choices that would have been better. What about the cliffhanger in Insidious 2? What about the Bride in Black? Is he done with Josh, or is he gonna come back? Why didn't we just do another prequel movie with Elise? In the attempts to make this movie happen, we also ruined what the further looks like, because I don't understand the mechanics of it anymore. At first, I thought I had a pretty good idea, but now it's just kind of like, we're going to do whatever fulfills the need for this movie, and we're going to disregard everything else. Also, it completely ruins the lipstick-faced demon, which admittedly, as the series has progressed, looked like more and more of a joke compared to the other ghosts, but now he's just not threatening at all. Insidious the Red Door takes what was the previous low point of The Last Key and almost makes it look like a decent movie. This is the worst the Insidious franchise has ever been. It will be going straight to the F tier. After this film, people lost all faith in the series. It showed us that more than anything, Blumhouse is desperate to keep this franchise going at any means necessary. It doesn't care about the story, the characters, the mythos, or even the scares. As long as they can make a new film related to the Insidious IP, they're going to do it. That is why, to no one's surprise, a sixth movie was released 3 years later. Unlike all the previous films in this video, Out of the Further won't have footage because it's in theaters at the time of recording this. Insidious Out of the Further, or Insidious Endgame as I like to call it, is probably the most polarizing Insidious movie so far because it's not good, it's not bad, it's like aggressively average. First off, the movie is the first one in the series to not be written by Leigh Whannell, and you can really feel that, for better and for worse. There are no random useless sibling characters, the writing for each character is a lot stronger, and the ghost actually has a motivation to it, unlike the previous few. However, it doesn't really do anything original at all. Almost everything in Out of the Further is a borrowed element from a previous Insidious film, and they're all just stitched together to make a weird Frankenstein of a movie. Some examples that stood out to me were Gemma's mom takes her own life to protect her daughter from the Further, which is exactly what Josh's dad did in Insidious 5. There are some differences to it though, like Gemma's mom did it to actually protect her from a ghost in it, while Josh's dad did it because he wanted it to stop with him. Gemma gets hypnotized and stands up saying it isn't working, which is a beat-for-beat remake of a scene from the first film. And the ghost, while it does have a motivation, it's just the same exact goal Keyface had from The Last Key, that being wanting to open doors for ghosts to come to the real world. I've noticed a lot of people really loving this movie, and while I think that's fine, it also kind of bugs me, because all this film did was take things that were good or worked from previous movies, and then just slap it in this one, calling it a day. Even though Leigh Whannell isn't writing this time around, it feels like the series is just not able to let go of a lot of his typical tricks. The first place I want to stop and talk about is Gemma, who is a character that by all means has a lot of potential. Again, her mom took her life, but unlike Josh, she was old enough to not only know about it, but to see it firsthand. It created long-lasting trauma for her, and she wants to avoid it at all costs with her daughter Maya. Even still, she accidentally starts following the path her mom did because she begins to encounter the Further. There is a lot of weight to this because it looks like it could begin to tackle the idea of generational trauma, something that is very real. There are many scenes with with Gemma that are just exact mirrors of the ones with her mom from when she was younger. However, much like Quinn from Chapter 3, it pushes the story to the side in favor of setting up jump scares more times than it doesn't. It's a shame because Gemma, with a lot more care to her writing, could easily rival Elise as a super strong, maybe even best protagonist of the series. She's the focus of this film because for some reason she has the power to bring ghosts from the further into the real world. At first, this concept in the trailer made me roll my eyes because they treated ghosts being in the real world like it was a big deal. Let us not forget that ghosts came to the real world in the first movie, and the second movie, and the third movie, and especially the fourth movie, and of course in the fifth movie. It has happened again and again and again. It's nothing really too special. Although despite the ghosts coming to the real world in previous movies, they don't stick around. And for whatever reason, in Gemma's case, when she pulls them into our world, they can just stay here. Gemma's powers operate similar to Elise's, but instead of opening doors to let them in, she brings ghosts from the further through touch. The only way to put them back, just like Elise's power, is to close the door. By this, I mean she has the ability to grab a ghost and travel back to the further with them. They use this power to resolve her family trauma by quite literally traveling all of her baggage, including a full fucking house, to the further. It's kind of a wacky segment. I'll admit, it has a similar problem to the Red Door, where we spend the entire film building up to this moment, and it resolves in a matter of moments. But at least it felt more enjoyable than the Red Door. Unlike Josh and Dalton, who didn't need to get hypnotized to forget all of that though, Maya and Gemma definitely do. Their powers to take ghosts to the real world do not go away by the end of the film. They can still do that. There is a very real world where they go to sleep, pull somebody out, and the events of this movie happen again. I guess the writers want you to believe it won't happen again now that Cyrus Lamb is gone, who is the antagonist of this film. Cyrus was a cult leader before he died, and his entire goal as a spirit is to go to the further, bring all of the ghosts and demons back to the real world. Again, though, his goal is just Keyface's goal, but unlike the last Key, they don't forget about it in this movie. In fact, they actually follow through with it. That's why I've been calling this movie Insidious Endgame, because if you can think of a ghost in the franchise, they are probably in this movie. The 50s family from the first film is here, the bride is here, Keyface is here, and even Lipstick Face is. The bride being here reaffirms some of my criticisms for previous movies though, because we were right. The bride does still want a second chance to live again, meaning it would have never stopped pursuing Josh. So why the fuck did the bride leave Josh when his mom was killed in the second movie? And why wasn't it in the fifth film if they're returning to the further where it should be waiting? While there are so many recognizable ghosts, they kind of only appear at random intervals to probably get an audience excited. There was one scene in particular with Lipstick Face where I felt like they wanted people to applaud and cheer as if it was a Marvel movie. It was a little silly. Outside of Cyrus, we primarily follow Cyrus's three stooges. His henchmen are living members that were in his cult, and they are cleverly named acolytes. I bet they thought really hard about that one. As for the horror, Out of the Further takes inspiration from Insidious 2. What could be scarier than white people? Old white people. Nearly all the time, these guys are just kind of goofy, and most of the movie they just reminded me of the hitchhiking ghosts from Disney's ride The Haunted Mansion. The lighting didn't help, because there were a lot of bright oranges that made it feel like an amusement park. It was hard to take them seriously, and in fact, I would dare to say this movie is, again, not scary. There were a few scenes in this film I audibly laughed in the theater, like when the ghost switches places with a dog and starts barking, and when the police officer starts slapping and tasing the older people. Now don't get me wrong, there were some decent moments in the movie, like where ghosts were lurking in the backgrounds of shots. Again, this movie borrows some elements from other films. Do you remember how I mentioned one of the scarier parts of Insidious 2 was the body horror, like when Josh's teeth were falling out? If anybody else found that scene spooky, there is a segment in Out of the Further that will make your skin crawl. I had to look away from the screen because it was honestly too fucking gross for me to look at. Outside of these little things, this movie did not scare me. I did feel tense, but that was just because I knew there was going to be a super loud sound in my theater that was going to hurt my ears. Something that doesn't really aid the horror in this film is the lighting. I know I already previously compared it to an amusement park, but in other movies, ghost makeup was hidden to the best of the crew's ability with lower lighting, camera filters, or heavy amounts of haze. In Out of the Further, you can clearly see all of the ghosts super well, and they are plainly just people caked in white makeup. The ghosts are some of the worst they've looked in the entire series up to this point. Although, to give them some credit, compared to other ghosts in the series, Cyrus and the Acolytes do pose a real threat. The body count in this film is the highest it's been. These ghosts and guys actually kill people. Again, ratioing lipstick face. How are you going to get one-upped by actual fucking old people? Out of the Further, despite its name, does not build upon the Further at all. Much like the Red Door, it just hopes we've forgotten how it works, so Elise can explain it all to us again for the 6th time. It does at least confirm to us something that I thought was obvious by the last key, which is that the ability to astral project is hereditary. Again, we should have already known this. Josh's dad could do it, Josh could do it, Dalton could do it, and in the last key, Elise and Imogen could do it. In this film, Gemma's mom, Gemma, and Maya can do it. I've seen a lot of people treating this like it's a giant revelation for this series, but to me it raises questions with previous films once again. For example, is Callie going to be an astral projector? They clearly were setting her up to be one with that ghost that really wanted her. Also, where is Imogen still? I feel like this movie had the perfect opportunity to bring her back into the picture, or honestly, Carl, come on, give Carl something to do. Instead, the film brings in a tattoo artist named Claire, who doesn't do a thing outside of being our connection to Elise. Unless you really think tattooing oranges is cool. Which also, speaking of Elise, I have something to say. And you know this might be a hot take. This is the worst the series has treated her character. I feel like Elise did not need to be in this movie. She is just a source of exposition, pushes the plot forward, and guides Gemma around in the Further. It made me think of something I hadn't before, which is probably another plot inconsistency. In Insidious Chapter 2, Elise mentioned she had passed on, but came back because she heard Josh's voice and wanted to help him. That's fine. Again, you know, it felt like an ass pull, but it made sense enough, I suppose. The reason I think it's a plot inconsistency is because after she helps Josh, why is she sticking around? She wanted to pass on and be with her husband. Her work is done. When Elise showed up at the end of the Red Door to Josh, it made sense, I guess, because, you know, she was integral to that family. But going to the family at the end of the second movie and her being in this one don't make much sense. It's apparent after Out of the Further that they don't know what else to do with Elise. And if you ask me, they should let her rest. You killed her for a reason. She's dead, man. If we really want Elise to keep being an important part of Insidious, we just need to go back and do more prequel movies. Which, speaking of the prequel movies, this is the first Insidious movie without Specs and Tucker. Where are they? Did we just give up on trying to do something interesting with them, so we're just not going to include them in the movie anymore? Ultimately, I'm left confused, just like the last film, on what the purpose on Out of the Further was. It is much better than the Red Door and the Last Key, but the entire story and scares are just rehashed and borrowed ideas from other movies in the franchise. Nothing is new. Elise is still dead. We've had about the most threatening ghost with the most ambitious goal in the series. There is nowhere left to go from here. But they are definitely planning to keep going from here. Next to the bride, Keyface, and Lipstick Face were two new demons that the camera clearly focused on multiple times. I am certain we will be seeing the two of them in future installments of the series, because even though the cow is dry, there is no world Blumhouse does not keep milking Insidious. I think what's the worst of all is that this movie just wasn't very fun to watch. Pretty much all of the Insidious movies have been fun because of their goofiness. It's almost made the franchise feel like the fast food of horror. These movies are made quick and with low quality, but when they hit, it's a great time. I found myself super bored with this movie for nearly the entire runtime. I think this movie actually could have used the goofiness and charm that the second film had, because a lot of the time, it did feel like it took itself a little too seriously. Insidious 2, I'm sorry. This is the second time in this video I've realized I went too hard on you. I didn't realize how good the film would be compared to the rest of the series, and in hindsight, I think I'm gonna reorganize this tier list a little bit real quick. Insidious 1 will move up to A, Insidious 3 will move to A. I still think these are good watches. I would recommend these to anybody. Insidious 2 is going up to B because while it is unserious and not super coherent narratively, that's okay because it's just so much fun to watch. I'll put Out of the Further in C tier. It is the most middle-of-the-road movie of the bunch, but since it's following up 2 bad movies, I think a lot of people are going to treat this like it's God coming down from heaven. I imagine in time that this movie will sour to a lot of people. We'll see though. I could be wrong. With this movie, the canonical timeline becomes Insidious 3, Insidious the Last Key, Insidious 1, Insidious 2, Insidious the Red Door, and then Insidious Out of the Further, because Elise has some lines that confirm this movie takes place only a few weeks after the Red Door ends. There was no cliffhanger ending to Out of the Further, but trust me, there will be more. Insidious as a franchise is one of the most mixed bags of a series that horror has to offer, but I don't think that should make you feel weird or bad for liking these movies. I've definitely dunked on them a lot, but there is a reason they're on a 6th movie, because there are fans. There are people that will show up and watch any one of these films. I myself, to some degree, would classify myself as a fan of the series. I like The Further, I like Elise, I like some of the scares, I like some of the ghosts. It's 50-50, sure, but you know, I think I'm like a ride or die. As much as I think it's a tired franchise, it does lack a conclusion of some kind, so I'll see y'all then when Insidious 7 Doomsday drops.
Later.